BMW iX3 mid-sized EV crossover marks a new phase of electric vehicle development from the Munich maker. The brand's 5th generation electrified tech delivers a very competitive 285-mile range, and it's all been built into the X3 floor plan using rear-wheel drive and a single motor format in such a way as to minimise the usual EV handling downsides of extra bulk and weight. As a result, here's an electric car that someone used to a combustion model might be able to adapt to remarkably easily.
You tend to have higher expectations of the handling of any BMW, even a fully electric one, and the Munich maker didn't want this iX3 to disappoint, hence the clever way that the battery here has been integrated within the floor plan, lowering the centre of gravity by up to 75mm over the standard X3 for what BMW describes as noticeably enhanced lateral dynamics, which is just as well because, like other EVs, this one has a bit of a weight problem. It tips the scales at nearly 2.2 tonnes. That's despite the fact that it has a slightly smaller battery than some of its rivals. It's 80 kilowatt hours in size, although only 74 kilowatt hours of that is usable. The quoted WLTP driving range figure of up to 285 miles is class competitive though. The iX3 is exclusively rear-driven, power coming from a rear-mounted electric motor producing 286 horsepower, which revs far higher than any of BMW's early motors, up to 17,000 RPM compared to the 14,000 RPM of the brand's existing i3 EV hatch. As you'd expect, it's mated to a single-speed auto gearbox. 62 miles an hour from rest occupies 6.8 seconds, which is just 0.4 of a second slower than the conventional X3 S-Drive 30i 2-litre petrol turbo model. But top speed, that's limited to 112 miles an hour to protect the range. Adaptive suspension with electronically controlled dampers is standard. From a conventional 7 kilowatt home wall box, charging is just about possible overnight. I think 11 hours and 45 minutes, empty to full. If your home power supply can accommodate a wall box of the more powerful 11 kilowatt sort, well, then you could reduce your charging time from empty to full to around 8 hours instead. Out and about, well, plugging the vehicle into a direct current DC rapid charging station opens the door to rapid charging outputs of up to 150 kilowatts, and that means that the high voltage battery can be charged from 0 to 80% of its full capacity in just 34 minutes. The iX3 presents itself pretty much exactly as you'd expect an X3 with full battery power to look. A few blue BMW iPerformance touches, some subtle, some not, grille and headlight contours which reference the i4 and the iX, and a set of unique error-optimised wheels. Just enough for the neighbours to recognise your switch to EV-ness before they see you plugging in. Time to take a look inside. Cabin access is possible via smartphone if you've selected the digital key option and you have the right kind of handset. BMW's clear aim here was obviously to make the transition to full electric drive as seamless as possible. So much so that you'd be hard-pressed to notice any changes at all here at the wheel over an ordinary X3, but there are some. The gear selector, for example, has a blue stripe on it, so does the door trim. There's a silver plaque below the ventilation controls saying iX3, and the start button's blue. Otherwise, everything will be very familiar to you if you speak the Bavarian maker's current design language. You're seated in the pleasingly commanding position that you'll want if you've chosen an iX3 rather than the company's other EV at this size and price point, the i4 Saloon. Cabin screen tech comes courtesy of BMW's Live Cockpit Professional package, which gets you a couple of large screens, a 12.3-inch one for the instrument binnacle and a similar sized one for the control display in the centre stack. The instrument cluster display initially looks familiar until you realise that on the right-hand side, where there'd normally be a rev counter, there is instead an e-power percentage power meter, and that briefs you on your current energy consumption. As for the central control display in the middle of this stitched dash, well, there's some clever stuff incorporated into this 7th generation iDrive setup, including the brand's Connected Package Professional Media Package and what BMW calls the Intelligent Personal Assistant, which works a bit like the Siri or Google Assistant systems you might use in your phone and is there to answer questions that you can voice to the car as you drive it. Let's take a seat in the back. Helped by recesses in the front seat backs, a 6-footer will be able to sit comfortably behind a driver of similar size, which is about as much as you can ask of a mid-sized SUV of this sort. There's no seat sliding functionality such as you'd find on BMW's smaller X1 crossover. The huge battery pack beneath the seats puts paid to any thought of that, but the backrest does at least recline, which surprisingly is a rare feature in this class. iX3 customers also enjoy the standard fitment of this panoramic glass roof, which means that what would otherwise be a rather dark cabin can be flooded with a welcome burst of sunlight. What about luggage space? Once this powered hatch rises, you're provided with 510 litres of capacity. That's 40 litres less than an ordinary X3, although it's 60 litres more than you'll get in a plug-in hybrid X3 xDrive 30e. If, though, you really need to supersize your space, then it's obviously a case of pushing forward the rear bench using these catches here on either corner, just inside the tailgate. Once they've been pulled, a 1,560 litre cargo area is revealed. Again, 40 litres less than you'll get in the ordinary X3. Back in 2011, the BMW i division was founded, and when in 2013 it announced its first car, the groundbreaking little i3 with its futuristic carbon fibre monocoque chassis, we all thought that the Bavarians had stolen a march on their premium brand rivals when it came to EV technology. We certainly didn't think that it would be another 7 years before we saw the company's next full EV, or that when we did, it would be a battery confection shoehorned into a combustion platform as part of a body shell identical to existing petrol and diesel models. We are disappointed that you can't have the all-wheel drive system that you'll find on the rival models that BMW's pitching this car against, and you might, like us, find it difficult to ignore the fact that there's a whole crowd of only slightly smaller, desirable, mid-sized EV models available for £10,000 to £15,000 less. But we're prepared to forgive this car much because the company has somehow managed to make it drive just as a BMW should. Expect many more Chinese-made models from this brand in the coming years, but few will be more significant than this one.